Chapter 1. The Rooftop Summer. The wind smelled like peaches and rain. Elara Quinn stood on the rusted fire escape behind the community center, squinting up at the sky as the clouds darkened like ink seeping through canvas. She had 10 minutes before her shift started and barely enough time to catch a breath. The volunteers were already moving tables and folding chairs inside, murmuring about the incoming storm. But Elara stayed put. She had always loved storms. Something about their chaotic honesty. The rooftop above the community center was off-limits, technically, but she'd found a way up there 3 weeks ago. Since then, it had become her little world, where she could eat cheap takeaway and scribble thoughts in the margins of her notebook. As thunder cracked across the sky, she heard footsteps behind her. Someone else had found the fire escape. "You really shouldn't be up there, you know." The voice was low, calm, and unmistakably amused. She turned. And there he was, Callum Thorne. In a white button-up rolled at the sleeves, charcoal slacks, and leather shoes that were not meant for back alleys, he looked like he had no business being in this part of Hunter Valley. His wristwatch probably cost more than her rent. Still, he had the gall to stand there like he belonged. "Neither should you," she shot back. He tilted his head, smirking. "Touché." They climbed to the rooftop in silence, the clinking of metal beneath their feet drowned out by distant thunder. By the time they reached the top, the sky had cracked wide open. Rain fell in soft sheets. The city below blurred into watercolor. They sat on opposite ends of the rooftop, neither speaking. Then Callum pulled something from his coat pocket. A sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. He held it up. "Trade?" Elara raised a brow, then handed him a soggy spring roll from her paper bag. It was the first of many exchanges. The rooftop became their sanctuary. Every evening after volunteering, they'd sneak up with whatever food they could scavenge and talk about nothing in particular. Dreams, childhood regrets, the stupid things they'd done as kids. Elara learned that Callum's mother had died when he was 11, and his father was the ruthless chairman of Thorne Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire. Callum wasn't just rich, he was legacy. She told him about her younger brother, Liam, who had Down syndrome and was the reason she worked 3 jobs. Their dad had walked out. Their mom was tired. Elara had become the glue. Callum listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, he never wasted words. One night, he said, "I don't believe in fate, but I believe we choose our moments. This is one of mine." That was the first time he kissed her. July brought longer days and warmer nights, but with it came a sense of ticking time. Elara felt it in the way Callum stared out at the city when he thought she wasn't looking. Something was shifting. "Are you leaving soon?" she asked one night, lying beside him on the rooftop with their fingers laced. He hesitated. "My father wants me back in Sydney. There's a seat at the board waiting. Will you take it?" "I don't know." He looked up at the sky, face unreadable. The stars above Hunter Valley weren't like Sydney's. They shone. Maybe that was why he couldn't lie here. "I wish I could give you something," he murmured. "You already did," she whispered. "You gave me a summer." Their final night together arrived like a secret they both knew, but didn't say out loud. The forecast warned of a massive thunderstorm. Still, they met on the rooftop. Callum brought candles in jars. Elara brought her notebook. They ate quietly under a tarp, watching the clouds roll in. "I wrote something," she said, voice nearly drowned out by the wind. She opened the notebook and read. "I don't know where this ends, but I know where it began with rain and cheap food and a boy who looked at me like I was more than tired hands and family debt. You made me feel seen, which might be the most dangerous love." Callum didn't speak. He simply reached over and kissed her forehead. "I'll write you," he promised. "Every week," she replied. "Every week." They sealed it with a kiss beneath the storm. The next morning, he was gone. Elara climbed the rooftop again, alone this time. The candles were still there, now filled with rain. Her notebook was soaked. She waited for his letters. 1 week, then 2, then months. But nothing came. Her summer with Callum Thorne became a secret chapter of her life, one she dared not reread. not until fate decided to write him back in. Chapter 2. Letters that never reached her. Alara's fingers trembled as she closed the mailbox. Empty. Again. It had been 4 months. 4 months since she stood on the rooftop, soaked in storm water and goodbyes, kissed by the boy who once promised her the world in the form of weekly letters. 4 months since her heart began counting Sundays like prayers, hoping each envelope that arrived would be his. And yet every time, all she got was junk, bills, and disappointment. In the first few weeks, she waited patiently. The next few, nervously. Now she didn't even know what she was waiting for anymore. Closure? An explanation? At home, her mother watched her with thinly veiled disapproval. "You need to forget that boy, Alara. Nothing good ever comes from rich men and fairy tales." Alara gritted her teeth. "You don't know him." "Oh, I know his kind. They always leave." What Alara didn't know was that Callum had written, every Sunday, 52 letters in total, and her mother had burned every one of them. She had watched the envelopes pile up, cream-colored and sealed with care. She never opened them, never read the ink bleeding with longing, but each time one arrived, she slipped it into a drawer until that drawer was full. Then she tossed them into the fireplace. She told herself it was for Alara's own good. Girls like her didn't belong in boardrooms or penthouses or love stories that ended with anything but heartbreak. "I won't let you be a charity case in someone's empire," she whispered to the flames. Meanwhile, in Sydney, Callum sat in the Thorne Enterprises penthouse office with hollow eyes. He checked his phone constantly, asked the receptionist if any mail had come for him. He never got a reply. By the 3rd month, his father noticed. "This is your life now," Malcolm Thorne said coldly. "Not some summer camp fantasy. Focus, Callum. We have a legacy to maintain." And Callum, cornered by duty and silence, did what Thorne men were raised to do. He buried the pain. Alara stopped writing in her notebook. Her world narrowed into shifts, sleep, and silence. Even Liam noticed. "Why aren't you smiling anymore, Lala?" he asked one night, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled through the ache. "Because I lost something, but I'm trying to find it again." One morning, she visited the rooftop again. The candles were gone. Rain had worn away their memories. She sat alone with a lukewarm coffee and scribbled a single line. "If you ever wrote, I didn't receive it. But I hope you're still writing, even if it's not to me." She tore the page out, folded it into a paper crane, and let it drift into the wind. And somewhere in Sydney, Callum stood in a glass tower, wondering why a letter had never been answered, and why the girl with fire in her eyes had gone completely silent. But the silence had a cost. Callum's once steady performance at the company began to waver. He showed up late to meetings, missed deadlines. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by mechanical precision and weariness. His assistant, Zoe, a sharp-eyed woman who never missed a detail, grew concerned. "You're not here, Callum. Not really," she said gently one morning. He looked at her blankly. "Do you believe someone can disappear from your life and still own your every breath?" Zoe didn't answer. She didn't need to. The pain in his eyes was answer enough. Back in Hunter Valley, Alara threw herself into preparing for Brisbane. Her scholarship was a full ride, something that still felt surreal. She started a blog anonymously, pouring her heartbreak into essays masked as fiction. One post titled "A Rooftop Memory" went semi-viral. Comments flooded in. "Is this real?" This made me cry. "I wish I had a Callum." She stopped cold at that. She had never used his name. Had she slipped? She deleted the post an hour later. But it was too late. The words were out there. One night, Liam crawled into her bed. He hated thunderstorms. "Tell me the story again," he whispered. "The one where the boy promises to write." Alara sighed. "It's not a happy story, Liam. But you smile when you tell it." She pulled him close. Once, a girl met a boy on a rooftop. He smelled like rain and trouble. He made her believe in forever. But sometimes, forever has a different timeline. Will he come back? She swallowed. Maybe. Or maybe she'll forget his name one day. Liam shook his head sleepily. You won't. You wrote him into your bones. Far away in a luxurious office lined with glass and steel, Callum opened a drawer and pulled out a photo. A candid snapshot Alara had taken with a disposable camera. Her smile was sunlight in black and white. He pressed the picture to his lips. I tried, he whispered. Alara arrived in Brisbane 2 weeks later with a duffel bag, 2 suitcases, and a heart she swore she had duct-taped shut. But as she looked out her tiny apartment window at the rain-soaked skyline, she realized something. She hadn't stopped waiting. She had just learned to breathe between the pauses. Chapter 3. 7 years later. The Sydney skyline stretched like a silver painting beneath the sharp glow of city lights. From the top floor of Thorne Tower, a needle of steel that punctured the sky, Callum Thorne stood before a wall of glass, hands in his pockets, watching his reflection blur into the storm. 7 years had passed since that summer. The rooftop was long gone, replaced in his memory by concrete meetings and soulless mergers. He had risen through the corporate ladder with the predictability of a machine: boardroom victories, glossy magazine covers, billion-dollar partnerships. But none of it felt like a win. Not when he still carried her memory like a locked box under his ribs. Zoe, now his chief of staff, walked in briskly. You have a 10 a.m. with HarborTech's acquisition team, and the gala invite list needs your sign-off. Right, Callum murmured, eyes still fixed on the rain. It's been 7 years, Cal. You can't keep waiting for her to walk back into your life. He didn't respond. He couldn't. In Brisbane, Alara Quinn balanced a tray of iced lattes and blueberry muffins as she navigated the narrow aisles of Chapter and Verse, a cozy indie bookstore cafe nestled between 2 office towers. Her mornings began at 6 a.m., with cafe shifts, her afternoons teaching creative writing at a nearby university, and her nights finishing edits on her second novel. She had become a name. Not a bestseller, but respected. Known for her emotionally raw prose. Known, ironically, for her stories of impossible love. Still, there were nights when she'd glance at the rain and wonder what Callum was doing. If he ever read the blog she had once started under a pseudonym. If he knew that her first novel, The Rooftop Letters, had been about him. Her editor, Bryony, slid into a seat across from her during a quick break. The Sydney Chronicle wants a feature on you. Big Sunday spread. Their culture reporter is flying in tomorrow. You up for it? Alara raised a brow. Me? Front page? You're the new It writer. Get used to it. Alara laughed, but inside anxiety brewed. She hadn't set foot in Sydney since she left. Sunday arrived with the sun for once. The interview was scheduled at the Sydney Botanical Gardens. Alara wore a deep blue dress, her curls pinned up, heels clacking nervously on stone paths. The reporter was polite, sharp, and enthusiastic. You write heartbreak well, he said. It feels lived. She smiled, tight-lipped. Some stories never leave you. The interview ended, photos were taken, and Alara decided to stop by an art exhibit near Circular Quay before catching the train back. That's when fate decided to intervene. Thorne Enterprises was hosting a private gallery event on the upper floors of the museum. Callum had donated a piece of heritage property for restoration, a rare act of public charity. The event was closed door. But Alara, invited unknowingly due to her rising status, had a pass. She walked in, clutching a champagne flute, unaware of the tension building on the other side of the hall. Callum spotted her before she saw him. Her profile, her posture, the same Alara, strong, graceful, unshakable. He froze mid-sentence as the curator introduced the exhibit. Zoe elbowed him subtly. Say something. But he couldn't. Not until she turned. Their eyes locked. Alara's heart stopped. She hadn't imagined him in years. Not truly. Not in a suit, standing like a king among oil paintings and investors. Her throat dried. He took a step forward. She blinked, then walked away. She stood near the balcony, gulping cool air. Her fingers trembled around the flute. Alara. The voice hadn't changed, smooth, measured. Her name in his mouth still sounded like a promise. She turned slowly. He was right there. Taller than she remembered. Sharper. Callum. 7 years collapsed into that single name. I didn't expect, neither did I. A beat of silence passed. "You look well," he said quietly. "You look rich." He laughed. She didn't. "Can we talk somewhere quiet?" She hesitated, then nodded. They found a bench in a side courtyard under the ficus trees. He sat, hands clasped, waiting for her to speak, but she said nothing. "I wrote you," he said finally. Alara blinked. "What?" "Every week, for a year." Her breath caught. "But I never—" "I know. I figured you moved on. Or maybe you thought I didn't mean it." "I never got your letters, not one." Callum looked stunned. "Then where did they go?" She thought of her mother, of the burning smell in the fireplace. Her stomach twisted. "They were taken from me." His face darkened. "By who?" "It doesn't matter." "It does to me. I thought you didn't want me." She stood. "And I thought you forgot me." "I tried. Believe me, I tried. But I couldn't." Tears blurred her eyes. She turned away. "Alara, don't. Don't make this harder than it already is. I've built a life, a good one." "And do you love it?" She froze. He rose slowly, closing the distance between them. "Because I don't love mine. Not without you." Thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was coming. She stepped back, swallowing her answer. "I'm sorry, Callum. Some stories aren't meant for sequels." And she left. That night, she returned to her hotel, closed the door, and wept like she hadn't in years. In another part of Sydney, Callum stared at an old photo she'd taken of him back then. Back when he smiled with abandon. They had found each other again. And still, they were further apart than ever. Chapter 4. The Proposal. 2 weeks after the gallery encounter, Alara sat in her Brisbane apartment, surrounded by manuscript pages and the hum of deadlines. Yet she couldn't concentrate. Not really. Every word she typed seemed to bend toward one name. Every scene she drafted felt like a ghost of what she hadn't finished saying to Callum. She hadn't told anyone about seeing him, not even Bryony, not even Liam. Until one evening, her phone lit up with a name she hadn't expected. Jonah Whittaker, her boyfriend. No, her fiancé. "Alara," Jonah said, his voice warm and steady as always. "I think it's time. I booked dinner. Somewhere fancy. You deserve a little magic." He didn't know she had already tasted magic and lost it. She forced a smile into her voice. "Okay, I could use a break." Jonah took her to a rooftop restaurant in the heart of Brisbane, glittering lights casting golden halos over wine glasses and water fountains. He had always been kind, always there, a lawyer with tidy suits and clean morals, someone her mother had once called a man who won't break you. He ordered their favorite wine, spoke about work, praised her upcoming book tour, and then he pulled out the box. "Alara," he said softly, going down on one knee. "I've loved you for years. You bring calm to my chaos. Will you marry me?" Time slowed. The ring sparkled like the life she'd tried to build. Her heart pounded, not with joy, but hesitation. Her mind whispered a name she hadn't invited into this moment. Callum. She opened her mouth and said, "Yes." That night, she stared at the ceiling as Jonah slept beside her. What have I done? In Sydney, Callum stood in front of a mural his mother had painted years ago. It hung in his private office now, a burst of wild colors among his grayscale life. Zoe entered with her tablet. "You're flying to Brisbane next week, right?" Should I arrange a hotel suite or the usual penthouse?" "Neither." Zoe raised a brow. "Going off-grid?" "I need air, space, less steel, more sky." He was going back to Hunter Valley, just for a weekend, or so he told himself. But fate had other plans. 3 days later, his company's foundation received a charity pitch from the very university where Alara taught. They were fundraising for a youth literature program, featuring Alara Quinn as keynote speaker. He signed the sponsorship form without blinking. The event hall was modest. Nothing like the black tie affairs Callum was used to. But it was perfect, warm, filled with laughter, handwritten signs, and awkward volunteers. Alara hadn't seen him yet. He stood at the back, behind a curtain, heart hammering like a teenager. When she stepped on stage, his breath caught. She wore a pale green dress and looked like a poem. "Stories," she began, "are how we remember the parts of us we're afraid to say out loud. The endings we rewrite. The letters we never sent." She paused. Somewhere in the crowd, a child coughed. "I once lost someone," she continued, her voice soft. "Not because I wanted to, but because the world got in the way. And now I write to feel whole again." Callum walked out just as she stepped down from the stage. Their eyes met. Alara froze. "Hi," he said. Just that. "Hi. Can we talk? I'm engaged. I know." She waited for anger, disappointment. But he only smiled sadly. "I'm not here to change your life, Alara. I just wanted you to know I never stopped choosing you, even when I didn't get to keep you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I missed your letters. I missed your words." They sat on the grass behind the hall, like teenagers hiding from chaperones. "I still write about you," she whispered. "I still build for you," he whispered back. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide tonight." But fate, again, wasn't patient. The next day, gossip columns exploded. Thorne CEO seen in Brisbane with engaged author. A photo of them sitting in the grass had gone viral. Students posted it online, tagging both of them. The comments were brutal. "Alara Quinn cheats on lawyer fiancé with billionaire ex. She's just like every gold digger. She used him for inspiration, now for power." Jonah called that night. "I trusted you, Alara. I thought you were done with him. I didn't do anything. But you wanted to." She froze. "You don't look at me the way you look at him," he said quietly. "I'm not angry. I'm just tired." The call ended. So did their engagement. Callum showed up outside her apartment the next morning, holding 2 coffees and a paper bag of pastries. "You're going to hate me for this," she said, stepping aside. "Why?" "Because I said yes to someone else. Because I was supposed to be over you. Because you came back and ruined everything." He placed the coffee down gently. "Alara, if love ruins everything that was never real to begin with, then let it." She looked at him like he had just undone 7 years of silence. And maybe he had. Chapter 5. The rain returns. The rain had always meant something to Alara. Back when she was younger, it had been a nuisance. A leaky roof, soggy school shoes, canceled outdoor plans. But after Callum, rain had become a kind of language, a rhythm, a memory. And tonight, as she walked alone through the streets of Hunter Valley, umbrella forgotten, her hair clinging to her cheeks, she remembered that night on the rooftop, the night that had started everything. It had been 7 years, and yet every drop that fell seemed to whisper his name. The streetlights shimmered in puddles, and Alara felt the world blur around her. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to move, to breathe, to remember who she was before the world labeled her a scandal. Her phone buzzed again. Bryony's 10th missed call. She ignored it. Then another name flashed across the screen. Callum. She stared at it until it faded into silence. At the Thorne Estates countryside retreat, Callum was pacing. He hadn't wanted to overwhelm her. He hadn't planned to show up again. But the tabloids had done their damage, and he couldn't stand the idea of her feeling alone in it. Zoe's voice had been sharp earlier that day. "You're not just a man anymore, Cal. You're a headline." "I never asked to be," he muttered. "But you are. And if you want to fix this, you better figure out whether you want her in your life for real or just in memory." He did. He wanted her for real. Rain thundered against the windows, and Callum drove. Alara ended up back where it all started. The community center was still standing, though the rooftop entrance had long since been sealed. The fire escape was gone. The mural she'd painted with the kids was faded, but the storm hadn't changed. She sat on the steps, rain soaking her dress, and whispered into the wind, "You said you'd write. a voice answered, and I did. She looked up. Callum stood at the bottom of the stairs, drenched, breathless, his eyes full of everything he'd never stopped feeling. "You always find me in the rain," she said. He walked up slowly. "Because I never stopped searching." She stood. "Why are you here?" "To ask if I can stay." "Just like that?" "No, not just like that. I'm not asking for a rewind, I'm asking for a restart." A beat of silence passed. Then she laughed, a shaky, soaked laugh. "You're insane." "Probably. And still so arrogant. Only when it comes to you." She looked at him, every defense melting. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." The rain poured harder, but neither moved, and then he held out his hand. She took it. They found shelter in a nearby bookstore cafe that hadn't changed since their teens. The owner, an elderly woman named Nora, barely blinked as they walked in, dripping wet. "Back from the dead, eh?" she quipped. "I'll brew something strong." They sat in the corner booth, shivering, laughing, and drinking the world's worst coffee. "So," Callum said, "what now?" "I don't know," Alara replied honestly. "But I know I'm not going back to Jonah. Not because of you, because I forgot what it felt like to want something for myself." Callum leaned in. "I never expected you to forgive me. You didn't need forgiveness, you needed time. We both did." They stared at each other, unspoken words dancing in the candlelight. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a tattered notebook. "Do you want to read something?" He nodded. She opened to a page marked with a faded coffee stain. "He kissed me once under lightning and left thunder in my chest for years. He was a memory that never aged. A rooftop I never climbed again." Callum swallowed. "That's beautiful. That's you." He smiled. "Read me another?" They spent the night in that booth, wrapped in words and glances until morning broke through the storm. And for the first time in years, Alara didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt found. Chapter 6. The Boardroom and the Battlefield. The sun returned to Sydney like it had something to prove. Skyscrapers glinted with renewed arrogance, and the streets pulsed with commuters and scandal chasers. A week had passed since the photo of Callum and Alara in the grass went viral. Headlines had been merciless, speculations louder than facts. Thorne CEO in love triangle scandal. Billionaire's old flame breaks off engagement. Alara Quinn, muse, mistress, or matchmaker. Alara tried to tune them out, but even the staff at her favorite cafe offered sympathetic glances. Bryony, her editor, wasn't as subtle. "You need to get ahead of this," Bryony warned. "Your book tour is next month. The last thing you want is to walk into a signing and get ambushed." "I didn't do anything wrong," Alara murmured. "But the world thinks you did. That's the battlefield, love. Doesn't matter what's true, only what sells." At Thorne Enterprises, the mood was electric. Callum entered the boardroom wearing a tailored navy suit, but no one missed the fatigue under his eyes. Zoe followed close behind, tablet in hand. "Shareholders are anxious," she whispered. "Thorne Tech's stock dipped 2 points since the photo broke. Some of the older board members are panicking." Callum nodded. "Schedule a press conference." "Are you sure?" "I'm done hiding. If they want a show, I'll give them the truth instead." That afternoon, Callum stepped onto a stage lined with microphones and reporters hungry for blood. He took no script, just a breath. "I won't deny that the woman in the photo is Alara Quinn, and I won't apologize for caring about her." Cameras flashed. "She's not a mistress, she's not a scandal, she's someone I loved and lost and found again. Everything else is noise." The room buzzed. One reporter shouted, "So are you confirming a relationship?" Callum gave a tight smile. "I'm confirming that I'll fight for her. Even if I lose the board, the shares, the headlines, some things are worth the risk." The conference ended in chaos, but Callum walked out lighter. Back in Brisbane, Alara watched the footage from her laptop, breath caught in her chest. "He said it," she whispered. "He said it out loud." Liam peeked over her shoulder. "Is he your boyfriend now?" She smiled. "He might be." The next day, the backlash came hard. 3 board members threatened to resign. Investors called for damage control. Malcolm Thorne, Callum's father, flew in from Geneva with fury in his briefcase. "You've turned this company into a soap opera," he bellowed. Callum didn't flinch. "I've reminded the world that there's a human behind the numbers." Malcolm slammed a file on the desk. "Then prepare to be replaced. If you don't clean this up in 72 hours, I'm calling a vote." Callum stood slowly. "Call it, and watch who stands with me." That night, Zoe entered Callum's office to find him staring at the rooftop skyline. "You okay?" He shook his head. "No, but I'm honest, for once." "Then let's win this." Alara flew to Sydney 2 days later. She wore sunglasses and a trench coat, but the media still caught her at the airport. "Are you back with Callum Thorne?" "Did you cheat on Jonah Whittaker?" Alara didn't answer. She just walked faster. She met Callum at his penthouse. He opened the door barefoot, in a black tee and sweats, like a man not expecting the love of his life to show up on his doorstep. "You came," he whispered. She nodded. "I saw your speech." He swallowed. "Was it too much?" It was everything. They kissed without a script, without fear. Then they talked. About everything. About the years lost, the letters burned, the rooftop memories. And Callum said, "This time, let's write our story together. No mothers, no media, no boardroom votes." She smiled. "You're not asking me to marry you, are you?" He laughed. "Not yet." "But you're thinking about it." He leaned in. "I've never stopped." On Monday morning, the Thorne boardroom filled with tension and suits. Malcolm stood at the head. "As of this vote, we will decide the future of Thorne Enterprises." Before he could continue, Zoe cleared her throat. "I think the board deserves full context," she said. She tapped her tablet, and the screen behind her lit up, showing footage of Callum's speech, photos of the youth literacy program he supported, and testimonials from employees about his leadership. Then she stepped aside. Callum rose. "I'm not perfect, but I've led this company with vision, integrity, and yes, heart. If that's not what Thorne stands for, then you're free to vote me out." Silence. Then, one by one, hands raised, in favor. Callum remained CEO. That night, he and Alara returned to the rooftop, not the old one, a new one. He'd built a replica above the Thorne Tower. Same dimensions, same view, even a bench painted in the same shade of blue. "Welcome home," he whispered. She stood under the stars and laughed. "You built our memory. I built our beginning." They sat in silence, watching the sky, waiting for rain. It didn't come. But sometimes healing doesn't need thunder. Sometimes it just needs the choice to stay. Chapter 7. Letters found, hearts torn. The attic of Alara's childhood home was a quiet graveyard of forgotten things, dusty furniture, boxes of childhood artwork, and time-stamped memories sealed in cardboard. She hadn't been here since her mother passed away, not really. Not alone. The rain had driven her indoors after visiting her mother's grave. Something in her chest, a gut feeling or ghostly whisper, had pulled her toward the attic. And there, wedged behind an old trunk, was a floral hat box. She opened it. Letters. Dozens of them. Some are still sealed. Some yellowed with age. Each envelope was addressed in that same familiar handwriting. Callum's. She collapsed to her knees, mouth agape. He had written, every single week. Her fingers shook as she opened the first one. The paper was fragile but intact. She read aloud. "Alara, today I saw a girl at the tram station with red curls and blue shoes. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't you. But it made me wonder, do you still wear blue shoes? Do you still write poetry in the margins of your notebook?" Tears fell before she could finish. She opened another. "I'm still here. I'm still waiting. And if this reaches you, write me back. Even just a word." Another. "I bought a bench for my balcony, painted it blue. I sit there sometimes and pretend it's the rooftop." By the fifth letter, her sobs filled the attic. She hadn't been abandoned. She had been robbed. She took the box to her apartment, placed every letter gently on her bed, and read them like scripture, like lifelines. Each one a window into his love, his patience, his pain. She cried. Then she got angry. She confronted her mother's memory with rage. How could you do this to me? You said you were protecting me. But from what? Happiness? A boy who loved me so much he wrote through silence? She hurled the empty box across the room. Then she picked up the final letter. The one postmarked exactly a year from the first. This is the last letter I'll write, Alara. If you get this, I hope you're happy. I hope you're living your dream, even if I'm not in it. But if there's any part of you that still remembers the rain, the rooftop, the promise, I'll be waiting. She called Callum that night. He answered on the first ring. Alara? I found them, she said, voice raw. All of them. He went silent. You wrote, every week. You never gave up. No, he whispered. I didn't. I'm sorry, I thought... I know. Silence. Breaths. The ache of years between them finally broke. I want to see you, she said. Come home, he replied. When she arrived, he was already waiting on the rooftop. Not the replica, the real one. Callum had bought the old community center and reopened it as a nonprofit arts space. The rooftop was restored, complete with fairy lights, a painted bench, and the original trapdoor. Alara stepped through the door and froze. He stood at the edge, back to her, looking out over the city. You painted it blue, she said. He turned. You remembered. I never forgot. She walked toward him, her heart thundering. Those letters, she whispered, they saved me, even when I didn't know it. I meant every word. She reached into her coat and pulled out one of her own, a fresh letter. For you, she said. He took it with shaking hands. He opened it. Read silently. Dear Callum, I'm sorry it took me 7 years to find the truth, but here it is. I love you. I've always loved you. Even when I thought you left, even when I tried to forget. You are my rooftop, my rain, my beginning, and I want our forever. He looked up, eyes glossy. I still have the bench, he said, and room beside me. She took his hand, and this time they sat together with no goodbye hanging between them, only the promise of everything ahead. Chapter 8. Flight delayed. Fate decides. The airport was unusually quiet for a Friday night. Callum sat in the lounge, dressed down in jeans and a navy blazer, staring blankly at the departures board. His flight to London was boarding in 45 minutes. A one-way ticket. He told no one, not even Zoe. London was supposed to be a reset. A pause from the whirlwind of media frenzy, boardroom politics, and emotional chaos. He had even arranged to work remotely for 6 months. A furnished apartment awaited him in Notting Hill. But something wasn't sitting right. He pulled out Alara's last letter from his coat pocket and reread it, lips moving in silent recognition of each word. You are my rooftop, my rain, my beginning. How could he run from that? In Brisbane, Alara paced her apartment, bags packed, heart racing. She was late. The moment she had finished reading the last of Callum's letters, something inside her shifted. She couldn't let him leave. Not again. Not this time. She'd booked the earliest flight to Sydney, then raced across the city to reach the international terminal. Liam had even helped carry her suitcase down the stairs, whispering, "Go get him." Now standing in a line at security, shoes in hand, jacket half on, hair wild, she was praying he hadn't already boarded. Callum stared at his phone again. Still no new messages. He checked the time. 35 minutes. He stood up, walked to the gate, and looked down the hallway toward the aircraft. Then he turned around. A woman in a trench coat came barreling toward him, nearly colliding with a suitcase. Alara? She didn't answer, just ran. And then, for the second time in their lives, they collided, like rain meeting the sea. I thought I missed you, she gasped. You almost did. You can't leave. I know. Then stay. His arms wrapped around her. Only if you ask me to every morning. Done. People clapped. A security guard offered them tissues. The flight crew smiled. Callum walked up to the counter and asked to cancel his flight. The agent blinked. You're sure, sir? He looked back at Alara. She nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Later that night, they sat on the edge of his hotel balcony, feet dangling above the glowing city. No more letters, he said. No more lost time, she agreed. They talked until sunrise, about everything. The past, the what-ifs, the future. I want to move back to Sydney, Alara whispered. Be closer to you. Start fresh. Move in with me. She looked at him. I mean it, he added. Let's stop waiting for perfect moments. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Okay. The next few weeks were a blur of joy and rebuilding. Alara transferred her teaching position to a university in Sydney. Callum delegated more of his CEO duties to Zoe. They started going on morning walks, grocery shopping like a regular couple, and repainting the walls of Callum's penthouse. He even gave her a corner to build a writing nook, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the harbor. One day, Alara looked around and whispered, I think I'm happy. Callum kissed her temple. That's all I've ever wanted. But even as peace settled, a final storm loomed. Jonah appeared. He came to a book signing, waiting in the back of the room. When Alara saw him, she froze mid-sentence. Can we talk? He asked after the crowd thinned. Callum watched from a distance but said nothing. Alara stepped aside with Jonah. He looked tired, sad, but not bitter. I came to say I'm sorry, he said, and to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Inside was the ring he had proposed with. I kept it too long. It's yours to do with what you want. Sell it. Melt it. Turn it into earrings. Alara smiled sadly. Thank you. He nodded. You found the right ending. That's all I ever wanted for you. That night, Callum wrapped his arms around her tightly. Are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I just closed a chapter. Good, because our story's just getting started. Chapter 9. After the Rain. The early spring breeze drifted through the open window of the penthouse, carrying with it the soft scent of lavender and ocean salt. Alara stirred in bed, the sheets tangled around her legs, sunlight warming her skin. It was a new beginning. Callum stood at the kitchen island, whisking eggs in a bowl like a man who had finally learned to slow down. In a crisp white t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, he looked younger, freer, like the CEO mask had finally slipped off and revealed the boy from the rooftop once again. You're domestic now? Alara teased, padding barefoot across the room. If it means keeping you here, I'll even learn to bake. He leaned in to kiss her forehead. Breakfast before your lecture. Then I want you all to myself. Greedy. Guilty. Their life had settled into something gentle and grounded. Alara's lectures were filling up with students eager to write stories that mattered. Her second novel was nearly done. Callum had surprised everyone by stepping back from the daily operations of Thorn Enterprises and shifting focus to their nonprofit arts center. They were building something together. One night, as they walked along the harbor, she asked, Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never saw each other again? Callum nodded. I would have turned into someone I wouldn't recognize. My father's mirror, my board's puppet, but I didn't. Because of you. She squeezed his hand. You would have found your way back anyway. You always do. Zoe dropped by the rooftop center one Friday with news. The foundation wants to name the new rooftop library after you both. The Rooftop Letters Project. Alara laughed. You're kidding. Dead serious. We're hosting a dedication gala in 2 weeks, and Callum's giving a speech. He groaned. Public speaking again? Zoe raised an eyebrow. It's either that or Alara reads the first letter you ever wrote her. Alara smirked. I think the public would love to hear about your obsession with my blue shoes. Callum groaned louder. At the gala, the space was lit with soft lanterns, music from a local quartet filling the evening air. Former students, artists, and patrons filled the rooftop, now transformed into a sanctuary of stories. Callum took the mic, heart pounding in his throat. He glanced at Alara, who gave a small nod. I used to think the rooftop was just a place, he began. But it wasn't. It was a moment, a memory, a second chance I didn't know I needed. He paused. Now, this rooftop has become a place for others to write their beginnings, just like we did. And if one kid finds the courage to write a letter that changes everything, then every storm we went through will have been worth it. The crowd erupted into applause. Later, Alara found him at the edge of the roof, drink in hand, eyes misty. "You okay?" He smiled. "I just realized something." "What?" "We've had so many endings, but this feels like the first chapter." Weeks later, Alara woke up to find an envelope on her pillow. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Alara, I promised you no more letters, but this one is different. This one doesn't ask for answers. It offers one. Will you marry me? Callum." She burst into laughter, then tears. He appeared at the doorway, holding a ring. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." Chapter 10. When the Rain Fell Twice. The wedding was set for late spring on the same rooftop where everything had begun. It was Callum's idea. "We started here," he'd said, running his fingers over the newly polished wooden bench. "We should make forever here, too." There were only 50 guests, friends, family, colleagues, and a few students who had slipped handwritten letters into Alara's palm at her last lecture. Zoe officiated the ceremony, wearing a navy suit and her signature smirk. "You two took a damn long time," she said into the mic. The rooftop laughed. Alara wore a flowing ivory gown, her curls pinned with pearl-studded clips. Callum wore his mother's wedding cufflinks. "I never thought I'd cry at my wedding," he whispered, dabbing his eyes. "I thought CEOs were immune." Alara grinned. "Not when they're marrying a writer." The vows were not scripted. Callum took Alara's hands in his. "You were the rain, the storm, the sun after. You changed the skyline of my soul." Alara swallowed her tears. "And you were the letter I didn't know I was waiting to read, the one that made sense of all the others." When they kissed, petals rained from above. A soft wind carried the scent of lilacs across the city. The world stood still. Married life, it turned out, wasn't perfect, but it was perfectly theirs. They moved into a house near the coast, one with wide windows and creaky floorboards. Alara converted the sunroom into a writing studio. Callum built a rooftop garden with vines and wind chimes. She published her second novel 6 months later. It was called After the Rain. It hit number 1. Callum retired from public life, except for charity appearances. He spent most mornings barefoot, trimming basil and reading the paper, while Alara drafted chapters at sunrise. But not every day was light. 2 years in, Alara miscarried. It was early. Silent. A grief without a name. For days she lay in bed, fingers pressed to her stomach. "I feel broken," she whispered. Callum held her close. "You're still everything." They healed slowly, together. And one day she picked up a pen again, and he wrote her a letter, just one, left it beside the tea kettle. "We may have lost one chapter, but the story isn't over." 3 years later, they adopted a baby girl. Her name was Aria. She had Callum's dimples and Alara's eyes, and when she cried, she sounded like thunder. On the night they brought her home, a storm rolled over the coast. Callum stood at the nursery window, cradling Aria. "She came with the rain," he whispered. Alara placed a hand on his back. "Just like us." Aria grew quickly as children do. She loved books, hated peas, and demanded stories every night. One rainy evening, Alara opened an old box of letters and pulled one out. "Will you read me one of your stories, Mama?" Callum stepped in. "Sweetheart, tonight I'll read you one I wrote." He sat on the floor and began. "Dear Alara, I met you on a rooftop. I lost you in silence. I found you again in a letter you never read. And now, every time the rain falls, I remember, you were always worth waiting for." Aria clapped. "That's the best story ever." Alara smiled. "It is, because it's true." Years passed. They aged gently, like books on a shelf, worn but cherished. Callum's hair grayed at the temples. Alara's laugh lines deepened. They traveled less, wrote more, and never once stopped kissing in the rain. On their 20th anniversary, they danced on the rooftop beneath fairy lights. the same song from their wedding echoing through the night. Zoe was there, Liam too. And Arya, now 15, read a poem she wrote called When the Rain Fell Twice. "There are two kinds of rain," she said, voice steady. "The kind that soaks you, and the kind that saves you." Alara wept openly. Callum did too. A few winters later, Callum was diagnosed with early-onset memory loss. The days blurred. Names became puzzle pieces. But one thing never left him. Every time it rained, he remembered Alara, even when he forgot what year it was, even when he forgot his name. He would turn to her and whisper, "You found me in the rain." And she would say, "I always will." On the final day, as the sky broke open one last time, Alara lay beside him on their bed, windows wide open. Rain pattered softly. Callum's breath slowed. And then he turned to her and whispered, "Alara, rooftop." She kissed his hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." The storm outside roared, and in his final moment he smiled. Because when the rain fell twice, so did he. Once for the girl who taught him to love, and once for the woman who never stopped. Epilogue: The Forgotten Letter. The attic had remained untouched since Callum's passing. Alara hadn't been able to bring herself to open the door, not until now. Arya was 17 and preparing for university when she said, "Mum, I want to write my essay about you and Dad, but I need more." So Alara found herself standing in front of the attic door, the same creaky handle she had once turned the day she discovered Callum's letters. The room smelled of dust and dried lavender. She inhaled deeply. Boxes lined the walls. Old books, picture frames, forgotten birthday cards. She opened a chest labeled Callum Rooftop Center. Inside were blueprints, doodles, Polaroids from their early days, and a small sealed envelope with her name written on it, in Callum's unmistakable handwriting. She had never seen this one before. The ink was slightly smudged and the paper frayed at the corners. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. "Alara, if you ever find this letter, it means I forgot to tell you something. Maybe I was too afraid. Maybe time ran out. But if you're reading this, there's one truth I never shared. Not even when I should have. It wasn't fate that brought me back to you. It was you. You wrote something once in that rooftop notebook. A single sentence. If you love something, trust the rain to return it. I found that notebook. Your mother had mailed it to my father out of guilt years ago. I never told you. But when I read it, I packed my things and came back. You didn't find me. I found you. Always, Callum." Alara collapsed to her knees, breath catching like it had all those years ago. Tears spilled onto the attic floor. In the weeks that followed, Alara told Arya everything. They went through old journals, letters, and photos, piecing together a deeper, more honest version of the story than either had known. At Arya's university entrance interview, the board asked, "What's one truth you believe in above all else?" She smiled. "That love isn't about timing. It's about persistence. My parents were separated by years, distance, letters, and silence. But somehow they found each other twice. Not because they were lucky, but because they never stopped choosing each other." Months later, Alara stood at the edge of the rooftop library with Zoe. The city glowed around them. Zoe handed her a letter. It was in Callum's office, never mailed. He wrote it after Arya was born. Alara opened it. "To the girl who gave me a family, there are days when I can't believe we survived the storm, that the world bent enough to let us love like this. If I ever forget your name, remind me of the rain. If I ever forget your face, show me the rooftop. And if I ever forget how we began, read me this letter. I love you. Then, now, always." C. On what would have been their 30th anniversary, Alara hosted an open mic night at the Rooftop Center. Writers from all over came to read letters, poems, and memories. Arya stepped up last. "I used to think love stories ended in death," she said. "But I've learned the truth." She opened a notebook. "This is my father's final entry." She read it aloud. I don't fear forgetting. I fear not feeling. But Alara, you were the thunder in my chest, the storm in my bones, the girl who turned rain into rhythm. Alara, sitting in the front row, wept openly. And outside, just as the final words fell into the night, it began to rain.